Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, another blow for the Gupta family. A judge rules that the last bank doing business with their companies in South Africa can pull out of the country. Also, Burundi's ruling party bestows the title of Eternal Supreme Guide on President Pierre Nkurunziza. Critics fear that it's another sign of the growing strength of a cult of personality developing around the leader. And there are only a few hundred members of the Lord's Resistance Army left, but the militia continues to claim lives in the extreme southeast of Central African Republic. We take a closer look. But first, the Gupta family's South African business interests have suffered another blow. On Monday, a group of about 20 companies linked to the Indian-born brothers lost a legal bid to stop the last bank doing business with their firms from pulling out of the country. India's Bank Baroda says that it's stopping trading in South Africa because it's strategically backing off international markets. The Guptas have been accused of graft and of using their influence on former President Jacob Zuma to shape policy decisions. Pressure's been mounting on the family since Zuma's exit last month. Our Jane Flanagan tells us more.
I can't think they can come back to South Africa. AJ Gupta has been named as a fugitive from justice. I think the risk to all three brothers is too great. Definitely the police want to talk to them. However, I can imagine they're going to continue to use the courts as they have done in the matter with the Bank of Baroda and hope that they can claw back perhaps some of their assets. But whether they'll ever be able to manage to get any money out of South Africa and to wherever they are in the world, I think remains to be seen. We've seen reports coming out of India over the last few days that properties owned by the Guptas there have also been raided, with police in India investigating money that's come into the country and not been accounted for. There was talk that the Guptas would present themselves this week in Parliament in Cape Town, where there is an inquiry into this issue that we know as state capture, the stacking of state-owned enterprises by Zuma's cronies, allegedly on the orders of the Gupta family. But their lawyers have now contacted Parliament and said the brothers aren't available for that. But where the brothers are at the moment is absolutely anybody's guess. There are rewards that have been put up for information leading to their capture, for their arrest, but so far unconfirmed reports about where they actually are. They remain at large, but I'm sure that they will continue to make their presence felt in South Africa. But I think they'll be using legal channels remotely through their huge network of lawyers. And for now, these group of businesses linked to today's court hearing, their future is absolutely insecure. The Bank of Baroda was the bank of last resort for the Guptas after last year. A number of lenders very publicly cut ties with the family, whose name has become such a toxic name in South Africa, and for so many people who really don't want to be known for having any relationships with them. It's remarkable how their business now, their interests in South Africa, they were once so powerful and so well connected. The speed with which their empire has unraveled has been quite bewildering, and it rather reflects the sudden downfall of Jacob Zuma himself, who was either their stooge or their sponsor, depending on where you saw the balance of power in their relationship with him.
Jane Flanagan there for us. US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson wrapped up his tour of Africa on Monday by cramming trips to both Chad and Nigeria into just one day. His first visit to the continent had already taken him to Ethiopia, Djibouti and Kenya, and had been due to last a week. The State Department claims the tour ended 2 days early because of demands to his schedule. In Jamena, Tillerson said Washington was considering lifting a US travel ban on Chadian nationals. In Nigeria, he promised US logistic and intelligence support in helping free 110 girls kidnapped from school in Dapchi last month by Boko Haram militants. Burundi's ruling parties bestowed the title of Eternal Supreme Guide on President Pierre Nkurunziza. Critics fear a growing cult of personality developing around the leader will just deepen unrest in the country. It's been mired in a political crisis since Nkurunziza sought and won a fiercely contested third term in 2015. Nicolas Chamel from our Africa desk tells us more.
Well, I spoke to members of the opposition and the civil society, and they, first of all, say it's not a surprise because they consider him to be a dictator. They compare him to Idi Amin Dada. They say probably the next step is that he's going to crown himself emperor. That's what they're saying. The ruling party, in the video of that meeting, that particular meeting, they say, the Secretary General, I quote him, "He is our elder brother, our father. No one can compare himself to him within the party." We also have a reaction from Willy Nyamitwe, who's one of the main advisors of the president, on Twitter, and he says that Eternal Supreme Guide is not the right translation, but then he doesn't give his own translation. I spoke to several Burundians. They say that another possible translation is permanent leader, but that basically boils down to the same thing.
So the opposition in exile is pretty worried about this. They already say that the country is a dictatorship, as you alluded to earlier. So what is the current situation in Burundi at the moment? Well, for foreign journalists, it's very hard to know because we haven't had access to the country in months. And yet, Willy Nyamitwe, one of the main advisors, came to Paris last September. He said the situation politically and economically is fine and that foreign journalists can now come to Burundi. So we asked for visas and we still have not had an answer after asking for these visas. Also, local journalists have fled. About 100 local journalists have fled, and the main opposition leaders have also fled. The whole crisis, of course, began in 2015 when he tried to run for a third mandate. There were huge protests. Many people were killed, mostly opposition members. The International Criminal Court has opened an investigation. They say that between April 2015 and May 2017, 1,200 people were killed. The UN says that more than 400,000 people have fled the country, and these refugees are mostly in Tanzania and Uganda. We were there a few months ago. We asked them why did they flee, and most of them said that they fled the Imbonerakure, that's the youth league of the ruling party. The government rejects the accusations made by the refugees, and they also reject the UN's figures on the number of refugees. They say that these figures are exaggerated. There are only a few hundred members of the Lord's Resistance Army left, but the militia continues to claim lives in the extreme southeast of Central African Republic. Since the departure of US and Ugandan troops, the LRA no longer faces much resistance. Take a look.
Every morning, Joseph gets on his motorbike to tend to his field of manioc in the thick bush surrounding Obo in southeastern Central African Republic. But he doesn't feel safe, since there are rumours that the LRA, one of Africa's most notorious and longest surviving militias, are in the area. The rebel group Lord's Resistance Army emerged in Uganda in 1998 as a fanatical Christian movement headed by Joseph Kony. According to a 2013 UN toll, the LRA was to blame for the deaths of more than 100,000 people, the abduction of between 60 and 100,000 children, and the displacement of 2.5 million people. But in 2011, the militia began to be rolled back by a force of 2,000 Ugandan troops, supported by about 100 US military advisors based in Obo.
We've been worried about LRA attacks since 2008, which are often threatening us, and they continue to threaten us.
Last March, the US military announced that the LRA had been reduced to irrelevance and wrapped up its side of the operation. A month later, the Ugandan army began withdrawing its troops. But in the absence of the state in this strife-torn region and the lack of a UN mandate to fight the LRA, the threat still remained. Patrick defected from the LRA with his wife, whom he abducted during a raid in a Central African village. Many fighters like Patrick defected or were killed, but since the US troops' departure, the Central African territory seems to have become a refuge for the LRA remnants, who are today divided into 3 groups. 2 of those still answer to Joseph Kony.
There are still kidnappings, mostly of boys, who are then trained by these groups and who become fighters. There is a new generation that is composed today mainly of Central Africans.
The group may have dwindled, but they remain a threat for the Central African people.
That's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.